They laughed when the old welder rolled up in his rusted pickup truck, tools rattling in the back like scrap metal. At the Riverside Racing Expo, where million-dollar supercars gleamed under spotlights and champagne flutes clinked among the elite, Chen looked like he'd taken a wrong turn from the junkyard. But hidden beneath oil-stained coveralls and calloused hands was a secret that would soon turn their mockery into stunned silence. This isn't just a story about building cars. It's about the moment when genius meets compassion, and how sometimes the most extraordinary dreams are forged in the most ordinary places. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the industrial district of Millbrook, where the sound of hammering metal echoed through narrow alleys lined with auto repair shops and metalworking facilities. In a cramped garage wedged between a tire shop and a defunct restaurant, Chen wiped sweat from his brow as he bent over a twisted exhaust pipe. The workspace was cluttered with half-finished projects, welding equipment older than most college students, and a coffee maker that had seen better decades. Marcus was 43, with graying temples and shoulders that carried the weight of countless hours hunched over intricate metalwork. His hands, scarred from years of welding sparks and sharp edges, moved with a precision that spoke of muscle memory earned through decades of practice. To anyone passing by, he was just another blue-collar worker trying to make ends meet in a neighborhood where dreams came second to survival. But Marcus harbored secrets that would have stunned the racing world. Hidden beneath stacks of old magazines and outdated invoices was an engineering degree from MIT, earned 20 years ago when his future seemed bright with possibility. Tucked away in a locked drawer were blueprints for automotive innovations that could revolutionize motorsports, sketches that had never seen the light of day because life had taken him down a different path. The path that led him here began with his younger brother Danny, who had been paralyzed in a racing accident 15 years earlier. Marcus had abandoned his promising career in aerospace engineering to care for Danny, taking whatever welding jobs he could find to pay for medical bills and keep food on the table. His dreams of designing the next generation of racing vehicles had been quietly shelved, replaced by the immediate need to survive. 3 blocks away, in a modest 2-story house with peeling paint and a front yard more dirt than grass, 17-year-old Sophia Reyes sat in her wheelchair, staring out the window at a poster of the Silverstone Racing Championship. Her room was a shrine to motorsports, walls covered with images of Formula One cars, rally racers, and drag strips. Magazine clippings featuring legendary drivers created a collage of speed and dreams that seemed impossibly distant from her reality. Sophia had been born with spina bifida, a condition that confined her to a wheelchair but had never dimmed her passion for racing. She could recite the specifications of every major racing car from the past decade, knew the lap records of famous tracks by heart, and had an intuitive understanding of aerodynamics that impressed even seasoned mechanics. Her notebooks were filled with modifications and improvements she imagined making to racing vehicles, theoretical adjustments that existed only in her brilliant mind. Her mother, Elena, worked double shifts at the local hospital to support them both, leaving Sophia alone for long hours with nothing but her dreams and the constant hum of race car videos playing on her old laptop. The family had no money for the specialized equipment that might have given Sophia a chance to experience the thrill of speed she craved. Adaptive racing programs existed, but they were expensive and far beyond their reach. The connection between Marcus and Sophia came through an unexpected twist of fate. Elena's car had broken down in the hospital parking lot after her shift, and a coworker had recommended the quiet welder down in Millbrook, who was known for honest work at fair prices. When Elena brought the car to Marcus's garage, Sophia had insisted on coming along, her wheelchair barely fitting through the narrow doorway of the cramped workspace. While Marcus diagnosed the transmission problem, Sophia's eyes wandered across the garage, taking in details that others might have missed. She noticed the precision of his tool organization, the quality of his welding equipment despite its age, and most intriguingly, a partially visible technical drawing peeking out from beneath a pile of invoices. When she asked about it, Marcus had quickly covered it up, mumbling something about old projects. But Sophia had seen enough. The drawing showed suspension components with modifications she recognized from advanced racing designs. This wasn't the work of an ordinary mechanic. Her curiosity piqued. She began asking technical questions about automotive engineering, testing his knowledge with queries that most welders would have found baffling. Marcus found himself drawn into an unexpected conversation about torque distribution and weight transfer, topics he hadn't discussed with anyone in years. Sophia's enthusiasm was infectious, her understanding of racing dynamics surprisingly sophisticated. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt the familiar spark of engineering passion that he had buried beneath years of survival mode. Over the following weeks, Sophia found excuses to visit the garage. She would sit in her wheelchair, watching Marcus work while pelting him with questions about metallurgy, aerodynamics, and vehicle dynamics. Gradually, Marcus began to open up, sharing insights that revealed the depth of his knowledge. He showed her proper welding techniques, explained the physics behind structural integrity, and even began sketching out theoretical improvements to racing designs. It was during one of these conversations that Sophia mentioned her ultimate dream, to experience the thrill of racing, to feel the acceleration and speed that she had only imagined through videos and magazine articles. The wistfulness in her voice struck something deep in Marcus's chest. Here was someone whose passion for racing matched his own, someone whose technical curiosity reminded him of his younger self, yet she was trapped by circumstances beyond her control. That night, Marcus found himself digging through the locked drawer, pulling out blueprints he hadn't looked at in years. His mind began working on a problem that was both technical and deeply personal: how to build a racing vehicle that Sophia could not only operate but truly compete in. The challenge was immense, requiring innovations in adaptive controls, specialized safety systems, and performance modifications that would level the playing field. The project became an obsession. Marcus began staying late in the garage, working on designs by the light of a single bare bulb. He calculated weight distributions, sketched control systems, and researched adaptive technologies that existed only in prototype form. Every spare dollar went toward acquiring specialized materials, often purchased from salvage yards and surplus suppliers who had no idea they were contributing to something extraordinary. Sophia became his unofficial consultant, offering insights into the driver's perspective that no engineering textbook could provide. She understood the subtle feedback that racing drivers relied on, the sensations that guided split-second decisions at high speeds. Together, they began to envision a vehicle that would not just accommodate her disability, but potentially offer advantages that conventional racing cars couldn't match. The design that emerged was revolutionary. Marcus planned to build a custom racing car with hand controls that were more precise and responsive than traditional pedals. The seating system would be fully integrated with the chassis, providing better. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Weight distribution and lower center of gravity. Advanced telemetry systems would give Sophia real-time feedback about vehicle performance, compensating for the tactile sensations she couldn't feel through her legs. But Marcus knew that building such a vehicle would require resources far beyond what his small welding business could provide. The specialized components alone would cost tens of thousands of dollars, and the precision required would demand equipment and materials that were well outside his budget. Still, he couldn't shake the image of Sophia's face when she talked about racing, the pure joy and longing that reminded him why he had fallen in love with engineering in the first place. Meanwhile, the annual Riverside Racing Expo was approaching, the most prestigious automotive event in the region. Manufacturers, racing teams, sponsors, and enthusiasts would gather to showcase the latest innovations in motorsports. For most people in Millbrook, it might as well have been happening on another planet, a world of wealth and sophistication that was completely disconnected from their daily struggles. The expo was the domain of people like Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Motorsports, one of the most successful racing organizations in the country. Victoria had built her empire through a combination of technical innovation, strategic partnerships, and an eye for talent that had made her teams consistently competitive. She was known for her sharp business acumen and even sharper tongue, someone who could reduce seasoned engineers to stammering uncertainty with a few well-chosen words. Victoria's operation was the polar opposite of Marcus's humble garage. Her facilities featured state-of-the-art equipment, teams of specialized engineers, and budgets that exceeded the gross domestic product of small countries. She moved through the racing world with the confidence of someone who had never known failure, never questioned her place in the hierarchy of success. This year's expo promised to be particularly significant. with several major manufacturers unveiling next-generation racing technologies. The event would culminate in a design competition where teams could present innovative concepts for the future of motorsports. The winning design would receive substantial funding and the backing of major sponsors, potentially launching careers and reshaping the industry. Marcus had seen the announcements for the expo plastered around town, but they might as well have been written in a foreign language. The entry fees alone would have consumed months of his earnings, and the thought of presenting his ideas to an audience of industry elite seemed impossibly intimidating. He was a welder from Millbrook, not a corporate engineer with a marketing team and polished presentation skills. But Sophia had other ideas. She had been researching the expo, studying the competition rules, and plotting what she saw as their opportunity to break into a world that had never given them a second glance. The design competition was open to anyone willing to pay the entry fee and meet the technical requirements. More importantly, it was judged on innovation and potential impact rather than corporate pedigree or marketing polish. Sophia presented her case to Marcus with the same systematic approach she brought to analyzing racing statistics. She had calculated the costs, researched the requirements, and even identified potential sources of funding through small business grants and community organizations. Her presentation was thorough, logical, and completely oblivious to the social barriers that made their participation seem impossible. Marcus tried to explain the realities of their situation, the vast gulf between his small operation and the corporate teams that dominated such events. But Sophia's enthusiasm was infectious, her belief in their project unshakable. She pointed out that their design offered genuine innovations that could benefit not just disabled drivers, but the broader racing community. Their approach to control systems, weight distribution, and driver integration represented thinking that was fundamentally different from conventional automotive engineering. Gradually, Marcus found himself caught up in Sophia's vision. The practical obstacles remained enormous, but the core idea was sound. They had developed something genuinely innovative, a concept that could change how people thought about racing and disability. Even if they had no realistic chance of winning, the attempt itself would be worthwhile, a way of honoring Sophia's passion and his own buried dreams. The decision to enter the competition marked a turning point in both of their lives. Marcus began working with renewed intensity, pouring everything he had learned over 2 decades into creating something extraordinary. Sophia threw herself into research, studying every aspect of the racing industry and preparing for the possibility that their crazy plan might actually succeed. Word of their project began to spread through Millbrook's tight-knit community. Elena was initially skeptical, worried about the financial risk and the possibility of disappointment. But as she watched her daughter's excitement and saw the change in Marcus, she began to understand that this was about more than just building a car. It was about reclaiming dreams that had been set aside, about proving that innovation and passion could emerge from the most unexpected places. Other members of the community rallied around the project in small but meaningful ways. The tire shop owner offered advice on racing compound selection. A retired machinist volunteered his expertise with precision components. Even the local coffee shop began displaying Sophia's racing magazine collection, turning her passion into a source of neighborhood pride. As the expo approached, Marcus worked 18-hour days, transforming his cramped garage into a precision engineering facility. He fabricated custom components with tolerances that would have impressed manufacturers with million-dollar budgets. Every weld was perfect, every joint calculated to optimize strength while minimizing weight. The emerging vehicle was a masterpiece of adaptive engineering, beautiful in its functionality and revolutionary in its approach. Sophia spent her days at the garage when she wasn't in school, serving as quality control inspector, technical consultant, and chief cheerleader. Her understanding of racing dynamics proved invaluable as they refined the control systems and optimized the vehicle's performance characteristics. She pushed Marcus to consider possibilities he might have dismissed, challenging conventional thinking with the fearless curiosity of someone unburdened by industry conventions. The final weeks before the expo were a blur of frantic activity. Marcus had maxed out his credit cards, borrowed against his tools, and called in every favor he had accumulated over the years. The vehicle was taking shape, but it was clear that they were operating on a razor's edge financially and technically. One significant setback could derail the entire project, leaving them with nothing but debt and dashed hopes. But as the day of the expo approached, something remarkable was happening in that cramped garage in Millbrook. A dream was taking physical form, shaped by skill, passion, and an unwavering belief that barriers existed to be overcome. Neither Marcus nor Sophia fully understood the impact their creation would have, the ways it would challenge assumptions and reshape possibilities. The night before the expo, Marcus stood in his garage, looking at the completed vehicle. It was smaller than conventional racing cars, but packed with innovations that represented years of theoretical work, finally made real. The adaptive control systems were elegant in their simplicity, the safety features went beyond industry standards, and the overall design achieved a perfect balance between accessibility and performance. Sophia sat beside the car in her wheelchair, running her hands along the custom bodywork that Marcus had shaped with his own hands. For the first time, she could actually touch her dreams, feel the reality of something that had existed only in her imagination. The vehicle represented possibility in its purest form, a bridge between the world as it was and the world as it could be. Tomorrow, they would load the car into Marcus's battered pickup truck and drive to the Riverside Racing Expo, where they would present their creation to an audience that had no idea what was coming. They would face skepticism, condescension, and probably outright dismissal from people who couldn't see past appearances to recognize innovation. But tonight, in a garage in Millbrook, two dreamers sat beside a machine that proved that extraordinary things could emerge from ordinary places. The welding equipment was old, the workspace was cramped, and the budget was practically non-existent. Yet they had created something that could change the world, one precisely calculated component at a time. The morning of the Riverside Racing Expo dawned clear and bright, but Marcus felt anything but confident as he loaded their creation into his pickup truck. The vehicle, which had seemed so impressive in his garage, now looked impossibly small and crude compared to the sleek transport trucks already heading toward the expo center. Corporate logos adorned every surface of the professional team's equipment, while Marcus had only his name painted on the side of his truck in letters that were already starting to fade. Sophia had insisted on wearing her best dress for the occasion, a blue outfit that her mother had bought for her high school graduation. She sat in the passenger seat, clutching a folder containing their technical specifications and presentation materials, her excitement barely contained despite the early hour. She had been awake since 4 in the morning, reviewing their notes and mentally rehearsing the points they would need to make to convince skeptical judges. The drive to the expo took them through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, past corporate headquarters, and research facilities that represented the legitimate face of the automotive industry. Marcus felt increasingly out of place as they approached the venue, his self-doubt growing with every mile. What had seemed like a brilliant idea in the familiar confines of his garage now felt like an exercise in public humiliation. The Riverside Convention Center was a massive glass and steel structure that seemed designed to intimidate visitors with its scale and modernity. Corporate banners hung from every surface, advertising brands that Marcus recognized from magazine articles but had never dreamed of encountering in person. Security guards checked credentials at every entrance, their expressions suggesting that not everyone was welcome in this rarefied world. Marcus managed to find the exhibitor entrance after circling the building twice, his anxiety mounting with each passing minute. The registration desk was staffed by efficient young people in matching polo shirts who processed paperwork with the mechanical precision of those accustomed to handling hundreds of similar interactions. When Marcus presented his entry confirmation, the clerk's eyebrows rose slightly, as if surprised that someone of his apparent background had managed to navigate the application process. Their assigned space was in the far corner of the exhibition hall, as far from the main stage and premium locations as possible. The spot was clearly designated for amateur entries and experimental projects, the automotive equivalent of the kids' table at a family gathering. Marcus began unloading their equipment while Sophia surveyed their surroundings, taking note of the elaborate displays being assembled by corporate teams. The contrast was stark and demoralizing. Professional teams were erecting displays that resembled small buildings, complete with lighting systems, video screens, and interactive demonstrations. Uniformed technicians supervised the assembly of million-dollar racing cars that gleamed under the artificial lighting like mechanical jewelry. Marketing materials were printed on expensive paper, presentations were rehearsed to perfection, and everything radiated the confidence that came with unlimited budgets. Marcus's display consisted of a folding table, a few poster boards that Sophia had helped him prepare, and their actual vehicle, which looked increasingly modest under the harsh fluorescent lights of the convention center. He had brought his welding helmet and a few tools, thinking they might help demonstrate his craftsmanship. but now they seemed like props from a different world entirely. As the morning progressed and other exhibitors arrived, Marcus became acutely aware of the stares and whispered comments that followed his movements. His work clothes, practical for a garage but completely inappropriate for a professional expo, marked him as clearly out of place. Sophia seemed oblivious to the attention, focused entirely on arranging their materials and preparing for the afternoon presentations. The first real confrontation came when Marcus was adjusting their display banner, trying to make it look more professional than his limited resources had allowed. A group of engineers from Apex Racing Technologies, one of the most prestigious teams in the industry, had claimed the premium space directly across from Marcus's modest setup. Their leader, a man named Richard Blackwood who wore his success like expensive cologne, noticed Marcus struggling with the banner and decided to investigate. Blackwood approached with the casual arrogance of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. He was accompanied by two younger engineers who followed slightly behind, ready to laugh at his jokes and validate his opinions. His gaze swept over Marcus's display with the kind of professional assessment that could reduce years of work to a few dismissive observations. "Interesting project," Blackwood said, his tone suggesting anything but genuine interest. "I don't think I recognize your organization. Are you with one of the technical schools?" The question was phrased politely enough, but the underlying assumption was clear. Marcus couldn't possibly be a serious competitor, merely an educational curiosity allowed to participate for diversity purposes. Marcus felt his face flush with embarrassment, but before he could respond, Sophia wheeled up beside him. Her presence seemed to confuse Blackwood, who hadn't expected to encounter a teenager in a wheelchair as part of what he had assumed was a student project. His expression shifted subtly, becoming even more condescending as he tried to process this unexpected element. "Actually," Sophia said with the fearless directness of youth, "we're independent designers. This is Marcus Chen, and he's built something that's going to revolutionize adaptive racing." Her confidence was absolute, unburdened by the social dynamics that had left Marcus tongue-tied. She spoke as if their success was inevitable, as if Blackwood's recognition was merely a formality. Blackwood's smile became patronizing in a way that made Marcus's hands clench into fists. "Adaptive racing," he repeated, as if the term were foreign to him. "That's very admirable." Of course, the technical challenges in professional motorsports are quite complex. Safety regulations alone require extensive testing and certification that takes years to complete. The implication was clear. Whatever Marcus and Sophia had built, it couldn't possibly meet the standards required for serious racing. Blackwood was dismissing them before even examining their work, writing them off based on appearances and assumptions. His companions nodded sagely, reinforcing their leader's verdict with the practiced ease of professional sycophants. Marcus felt the familiar weight of defeat settling over him, the same sensation he had experienced countless times when his background and circumstances had closed doors before they could even be opened. He began to formulate a polite response that would allow him to retreat with minimal embarrassment, to acknowledge the vast gulf between his amateur efforts and the professional world he had been foolish enough to challenge. But Sophia had no intention of backing down. "Would you like to see the technical specifications?" she asked, opening her folder with the same confidence she had shown throughout their project. The control systems alone represent advances that could benefit the entire racing community, not just adaptive applications. Blackwood glanced at the papers Sophia offered, but his attention was clearly elsewhere. The judging wouldn't begin for several hours, and he had more important people to network with than a disabled teenager and her blue-collar mentor. "I'm sure it's very impressive," he said in the tone adults used when humoring children. "Good luck with your presentation." As Blackwood and his entourage moved away, Marcus heard one of the younger engineers make a comment about inspiration porn and feel-good stories that missed the point of serious engineering. The words stung precisely because Marcus had harbored similar fears about their project, worries that they were participating in their own exploitation, providing touching content for others, entertainment rather than genuine competition. Sophia, however, seemed energized rather than discouraged by the encounter. "Did you see how he didn't even look at our specs?" she asked Marcus. "He's going to be completely blindsided when he realizes what we've actually built." Her optimism was infectious, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were setting themselves up for public humiliation. The morning continued with a series of similar encounters as industry professionals circulated through the exhibition space, evaluating potential threats and dismissing obvious non-contenders. Marcus's display attracted curious glances, But most visitors moved on quickly after determining that he wasn't associated with any recognized organization. The few who stopped to ask questions seemed more interested in the novelty of his participation than the substance of his innovations. As lunchtime approached, Marcus found himself questioning every decision that had led them to this moment. The entry fees had consumed most of his savings, the time spent on the project had cost him paying work, and the entire enterprise was beginning to feel like an elaborate exercise in self-delusion. Sophia's enthusiasm remained undiminished, but Marcus wondered if he was failing in his responsibility to protect her from disappointment. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a biomechanical engineer from the University of California, had been circulating through the amateur section as part of her research into adaptive technologies. Unlike the corporate representatives who had dismissed Marcus's work without examination, Dr. Walsh approached with genuine scientific curiosity. She spent nearly an hour examining their vehicle, asking detailed questions about the control systems, safety features, and performance characteristics. Her queries were sophisticated and probing, clearly coming from someone who understood the technical challenges they had attempted to solve. Most importantly, she treated Marcus as a peer, recognizing the expertise evident in his design choices. "This is remarkable work," Dr. Walsh said finally, her tone carrying the authority of someone whose opinion mattered in academic circles. "The integration of haptic feedback with the manual controls is particularly innovative. Have you published any papers on these design principles?" Marcus explained his background honestly, describing his abandoned academic career and the personal circumstances that had led him to this project. Dr. Walsh listened without judgment, nodding at points where his experience clearly informed his engineering choices. When Sophia joined the conversation, Dr. Walsh immediately recognized her sophisticated understanding of racing dynamics and treated her insights with appropriate respect. "You should be presenting in the professional category," Dr. Walsh told them. "This level of innovation deserves serious consideration from the industry." She asked permission to photograph their technical drawings and take notes on their design approach, explaining that she was documenting emerging trends in adaptive technology for a conference presentation. The conversation with Dr. Walsh marked a turning point in Marcus's confidence. For the first time since arriving at the expo, he felt like his work was being judged on its merits, rather than dismissed based on appearances. Sophia practically glowed with vindication, her belief in their project validated by someone whose credentials were unquestionable. As the afternoon presentation period approached, Marcus found himself genuinely excited rather than merely terrified. They had built something worthy of respect, something that represented genuine innovation rather than amateur enthusiasm. The corporate teams might have bigger budgets and fancier displays, but Marcus and Sophia had solved problems that others hadn't even recognized existed. The presentation format was straightforward. Each team would have 15 minutes to explain their design, demonstrate its key features, and answer questions from a panel of industry experts. The judging criteria emphasized innovation, technical merit, and potential impact on the racing industry. Points would be deducted for pure spectacle without substance, which seemed to favor their approach over some of the more elaborate but less substantive displays. When their turn came, Marcus felt surprisingly calm as he began explaining their design philosophy. He spoke about the challenge of creating racing vehicles that could accommodate different physical capabilities without compromising performance. Sophia demonstrated the control systems, showing how the adaptive features could actually provide advantages in certain racing situations. The questions from the judges were probing but fair, focusing on technical details rather than challenging their right to participate. Marcus found himself drawing on knowledge he hadn't accessed in years, explaining engineering principles with the fluency of someone who truly understood the underlying science. Sophia fielded questions about the driver experience, with an expertise that impressed even the most skeptical panel members. As they concluded their presentation, Marcus felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with winning or losing. They had presented their work honestly and competently, proving to themselves and others that innovation could emerge from the most unlikely places. Whatever happened next, they had earned their place in this competition. The judging process would take several hours, during which the industry representatives would continue their networking and deal-making activities. Marcus and Sophia used the time to explore the other displays, finally able to appreciate the craftsmanship and innovation of their competitors without feeling intimidated by the corporate packaging. As evening approached and the announcement ceremony drew near, Marcus found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, he had been just another struggling welder, his dreams buried under the weight of practical necessity. Sophia had been a teenager whose passion for racing seemed destined to remain forever unfulfilled. Now they stood in a convention center, surrounded by the most influential people in motorsports, having presented an innovation that could genuinely change how the industry thought about accessibility and performance. Win or lose, they had proven that extraordinary things could emerge from ordinary circumstances, that innovation was limited only by imagination and determination. The announcement ceremony began with presentations to various category winners, building toward the grand prize that would be awarded to the most innovative design overall. Marcus felt his stomach tighten as they worked through the preliminary awards, getting closer to the moment when their fate would be revealed. When their names were called as winners of the Innovation and Adaptive Technology category, Marcus felt a surge of emotion that threatened to overwhelm his composure. Sophia's scream of joy echoed through the convention center, drawing smiles from even the calm and most jaded industry veterans. They had won recognition for their work, validation that their months of effort had produced something genuinely valuable. But the real surprise came when the grand prize winner was announced. As the presenter described the winning design's revolutionary approach to driver integration and control systems, Marcus began to realize that the description matched their own project. When their names were called as overall winners, the convention center erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. The prize included a substantial cash award, but more importantly, it came with offers of sponsorship and development partnerships from major racing organizations. Companies that had ignored Marcus's existence earlier in the day were now competing for the opportunity to work with him and Sophia on bringing their innovations to market. Richard Blackwood, the arrogant engineer who had dismissed them that morning, approached with congratulations that seemed genuine, despite his obvious embarrassment. "I owe you both an apology," he said to Marcus and Sophia. "I made assumptions based on appearances rather than examining your actual work. That was unprofessional and unfair." Victoria Sterling, the CEO whose reputation for ruthless business practices had intimidated Marcus from a distance, surprised him by offering not just a development contract but a position leading her organization's new adaptive technology division. "We've been looking for innovations that could expand our market reach," she explained. "Your work opens up possibilities we hadn't even considered." As the evening wound down and the crowd began to disperse, Marcus found himself surrounded by business cards and contact information from people who wanted to discuss partnerships, licensing deals, and collaboration opportunities. The financial security that had seemed impossibly distant that morning was now within reach, along with the chance to see his innovations implemented on a scale he had never imagined possible. Sophia sat in her wheelchair, beaming with the satisfaction of someone whose faith had been completely vindicated. She had never doubted that their project would succeed, never questioned Marcus's ability to create something extraordinary. Her unwavering belief had been the catalyst that transformed a welder's buried dreams into a revolution in adaptive racing technology. Later that night, as they loaded their award-winning vehicle back into Marcus's pickup truck, both of them were quiet with exhaustion and satisfaction. The convention center was nearly empty, the corporate displays were being dismantled, and the glamorous world of professional motorsports was returning to its normal rhythm. But something fundamental had changed. A door had been opened, a barrier had been broken, and the racing world would never quite be the same. In garages and workshops around the country, other dreamers would hear about the welder and the teenager who had challenged the establishment and won. They would be inspired to pursue their own impossible projects, to believe that innovation could emerge from the most unexpected places. Marcus drove through the empty streets toward Millbrook, where his cramped garage and outdated equipment waited for his return. Tomorrow he would begin the next phase of his journey, working with major manufacturers to bring adaptive racing technology to a broader market. The financial pressures that had dominated his life for so long would finally ease, allowing him to focus on the engineering challenges he loved, rather than the constant struggle for survival. Sophia stared out the window at the city lights, already planning the next set of innovations they could develop together. The racing car in the truck bed was just the beginning, the first step toward a future where physical limitations would no longer determine who could participate in the sport she loved. Her notebook was already filling with ideas for improvements and new applications, the next chapter in a story that was far from over. As they reached the outskirts of Millbrook, Marcus realized that this was more than just a personal victory. They had proven that excellence could emerge from anywhere, that innovation was limited only by imagination and determination. The industry titans, who had dismissed them based on appearances, had learned that genius often came disguised as ordinary people working in extraordinary ways. The old pickup truck rumbled through the familiar streets of his neighborhood, past the auto repair shops and metalworking facilities where Marcus had spent so many years perfecting his craft. But now those same streets seemed different, charged with possibility and potential. Other welders, other dreamers, other people who had been overlooked and underestimated would see what Marcus and Sophia had accomplished and dare to dream their own impossible dreams. In the back of the truck, secured carefully for the journey home, sat a machine that represented more than just engineering excellence. It was proof that barriers existed to be overcome, that limitations were often just challenges waiting for the right solution. Most importantly, it demonstrated that the most extraordinary innovations often came from the most ordinary places, forged by people who refused to accept that their circumstances defined their possibilities. The story that had begun in a cramped garage in Millbrook would now spread throughout the racing world and beyond, inspiring others to look past appearances and recognize the potential that existed in unexpected places. Marcus Chen the welder had become Marcus Chen the innovator, and Sophia Reyes the dreamer had become Sophia Reyes the catalyst for change. As they pulled into the familiar driveway beside Marcus's garage, both of them knew that their lives had been transformed forever. The recognition and opportunities they had gained were important, but the real victory was deeper than external validation. They had proven to themselves and the world that extraordinary things could be achieved by ordinary people who refused to accept limitations as permanent boundaries. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight they could rest in the satisfaction of dreams realized and barriers overcome. In a world that often dismissed people based on appearances and circumstances, they had forced recognition through the simple power of innovation and determination. Their success would echo through garages and workshops everywhere, reminding other dreamers that extraordinary achievements were always possible for those brave enough to pursue them. The morning after their triumph at the Riverside Racing Expo brought an avalanche of phone calls that Marcus had never imagined possible. His ancient answering machine, which usually recorded messages about broken exhaust pipes and fender repairs, was now overflowing with inquiries from racing teams, automotive manufacturers, and technology investors. Each message seemed more incredible than the last, offering partnerships, development contracts, and licensing deals that represented more money than Marcus had earned in the previous 5 years combined. Sophia arrived at the garage before dawn, her wheelchair navigating the familiar path through the cluttered workspace with practiced ease. She found Marcus sitting at his workbench, surrounded by business cards and hastily scribbled notes, looking overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of his circumstances. The trophy from the expo sat prominently on a cleared section of the bench, catching the early morning light streaming through the small windows. The weight of their success was beginning to settle over both of them in ways they hadn't anticipated. What had started as a passionate project between a welder and a racing enthusiast had suddenly become a business opportunity, with implications far beyond their small corner of Millbrook. The phone calls weren't just congratulations, they were serious offers that could reshape their entire future if handled correctly. Victoria Sterling's proposal had been the most substantial, offering Marcus a position as head of adaptive technology development for Sterling Motorsports, along with a salary that would dwarf his current income. The contract would provide Sophia with a full scholarship to study automotive engineering at any university she chose, plus guaranteed internships and career opportunities within the organization. It was everything they could have hoped for, yet something about the arrangement felt incomplete. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had also reached out, this time representing a consortium of universities interested in funding further research into adaptive racing technologies. Her proposal was less financially lucrative but offered greater creative freedom and the opportunity to publish their innovations for the broader scientific community. The academic path would allow them to continue working together while developing new technologies that could benefit disabled athletes across multiple sports. But the offer that intrigued Marcus most came from an unexpected source. Thomas Chen, his estranged older brother who had left Millbrook 20 years earlier to pursue a career in venture capital. Thomas had seen news coverage of their victory and reached out for the first time in over a decade, proposing to help them establish their own company, rather than licensing their innovations to existing organizations. The family dynamics surrounding Thomas's reappearance were complicated and emotionally charged. He had been pursuing his MBA at Wharton when their younger brother Danny had been paralyzed in the racing accident, and Marcus had never forgiven him for choosing his career over family obligations. Thomas had sent money occasionally over the years, but he had never returned to help with Danny's care or to support Marcus through the financial struggles that followed. Now Thomas was offering to leverage his connections in the investment community to secure funding for a startup company that would commercialize Marcus's adaptive racing technologies. He painted a vision of rapid growth, multiple product lines, and eventual acquisition by a major automotive manufacturer for hundreds of millions of dollars. The proposal was seductive, but carried the implicit assumption that Marcus would need his brother's business expertise to succeed. Sophia listened to Marcus explain the various offers, with the analytical approach she brought to all complex problems. She had spent the night researching each of the organizations involved, studying their track records, financial positions, and corporate cultures. Her notebook was filled with pros and cons lists, comparative analyses, and strategic considerations that would have impressed business school professors. "The sterling offer is safe," she told Marcus as they reviewed the proposals together. "Guaranteed salary, established infrastructure, immediate implementation of our designs. But we'd be employees, not owners. Our next innovations would belong to them, not us." She flipped to another page in her notebook. "The university consortium offers more creative freedom, but the timeline for commercialization could stretch for years. Academic research moves slowly." Marcus nodded, appreciating Sophia's systematic approach to evaluating their options. Her disability had taught her to analyze situations thoroughly before committing to any course of action, a skill that was proving invaluable as they navigated their sudden success. "What about Thomas's startup proposal?" he asked, though his tone suggested skepticism about his brother's motives. Sophia had clearly given considerable thought to the family dynamics involved. "Your brother has connections and business experience we don't possess," she said carefully. "But he's been absent from your life for 20 years. Can you trust him with something this important?" She paused, studying Marcus's expression. "More importantly, can you work with him without letting past resentments affect your judgment?" The question hit at the heart of Marcus's uncertainty about all the opportunities suddenly available to them. 6 months ago, his biggest concern had been paying rent on the garage and keeping his welding equipment functional. Now he was being asked to make decisions that could affect not just his own future, but potentially the entire adaptive racing industry. The responsibility felt overwhelming, especially when complicated by family relationships he had spent years trying to forget. As they discussed the various proposals, other members of the Millbrook community began arriving at the garage to congratulate Marcus and Sophia on their success. Elena Reyes appeared with coffee and pastries, her pride in her daughter's achievement evident in every gesture. The tire shop owner next door brought a newspaper clipping featuring their story, already planning to frame it for display in his waiting area. But the most meaningful visitor was Danny Chen, Marcus's younger brother, who wheeled himself into the garage with obvious effort. Danny rarely left his apartment, finding travel difficult and social interactions exhausting. His presence at the garage represented a significant gesture of support and recognition of what Marcus and Sophia had accomplished. Danny had been following the racing industry obsessively since his accident, maintaining connections with former teammates and staying current with technological developments. His insights into the competitive landscape were valuable, informed by an insider's understanding of how racing organizations operated and what drivers actually needed from their equipment. "The big teams will try to control everything," Danny warned as he examined the trophy and reviewed the various proposals. "They'll promise you the world, but once they own your designs, you become replaceable. I've seen it happen to engineers who thought they were partners, but ended up as employees with non-compete clauses." His perspective was shaped by bitter experience with organizations that had promised support after his accident, but had quickly moved on when his recovery proved slower and more complicated than anticipated. The racing world's emphasis on results and performance left little room for sentiment or loyalty when circumstances changed. Sophia found herself drawn to Danny's insights, recognizing a kindred spirit who understood both the technical aspects of racing and the challenges faced by disabled individuals trying to participate in the sport. Their conversation evolved into a detailed discussion of adaptive technologies, driver training programs, and the cultural barriers that prevented broader acceptance of disabled athletes in motorsports. As the morning progressed, Marcus realized that their decision about which opportunity to pursue wasn't just about financial considerations or career advancement. It was about defining what kind of impact they wanted to have on the racing industry and how they wanted to shape the future of adaptive technology. Each path offered different possibilities for influence and different risks of losing control over their innovations. The Sterling Motorsports proposal promised immediate implementation and substantial resources, but it would make them cogs in an existing corporate machine. The University Consortium offered research freedom and academic credibility, but with uncertain commercial prospects. Thomas's startup proposal provided potential for maximum financial return and creative control, but required trusting someone whose loyalty had been questionable in the past. By noon, the garage had become an impromptu community meeting space, with neighbors, former customers, and curious visitors stopping by to hear about Marcus and Sophia's triumph. The attention was gratifying but also overwhelming, making it difficult to focus on the important decisions that needed to be made quickly. Several of the organizations had requested responses within 48 hours, adding time pressure to an already complex situation. Dr. Walsh arrived in the early afternoon, having driven from the university specifically to discuss their research proposal in person. Her presence transformed the casual atmosphere of the garage into something more professional as she spread out detailed project timelines, funding, proposals, and partnership agreements on Marcus's workbench. The academic approach had significant advantages that were becoming clearer as Dr. Walsh explained the consortium's vision. University funding came with fewer strings attached than corporate sponsorship, allowing researchers to pursue innovations that might not have immediate commercial applications. The timeline was longer, but the potential for groundbreaking discoveries was greater when freed from quarterly profit pressures. Your work has implications far beyond racing, Dr. Walsh explained to Marcus and Sophia. The control systems you've developed could be adapted for aircraft, industrial equipment, even space vehicles. Academic research would allow you to explore those applications without worrying about market viability or competitive positioning. Sophia was particularly intrigued by the breadth of applications Dr. Walsh described. Her notebooks were already filling with ideas for control systems that could help disabled individuals operate various types of vehicles and equipment. The racing car had been just the beginning, a proof of concept for technologies that could improve accessibility across multiple industries. Marcus found himself torn between the immediate security offered by corporate employment and the long-term potential of academic research. His experience with financial uncertainty made the guaranteed salary from Sterling Motorsports appealing, but his engineering background appreciated the freedom to pursue innovations without commercial constraints. The decision became more complicated when Thomas Chen arrived unexpectedly, having flown in from San Francisco without prior notice. His appearance at the garage created immediate tension, as Marcus hadn't seen his older brother in person for over 15 years. Thomas looked successful and polished, wearing an expensive suit that seemed completely out of place in the industrial setting of the garage. The brothers' reunion was awkward and emotionally charged, with 20 years of resentment and misunderstanding creating barriers that couldn't be overcome with a simple handshake. Thomas tried to project warmth and family solidarity, but his obvious discomfort with the garage environment and his inability to acknowledge past mistakes made meaningful reconciliation difficult. "I know we have history," Thomas said to Marcus as they stood beside the award-winning racing car, "but this opportunity is bigger than personal issues. Your innovations could create a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. With my connections and business experience, we could build something incredible together." Marcus studied his brother's face, looking for signs of genuine remorse or understanding about the sacrifices that had been made while Thomas pursued his career. What he saw instead was the same single-minded focus on success that had led Thomas to abandon his family when they needed him most. The proposal sounded less like an offer of partnership and more like a business transaction that happened to involve relatives. Sophia observed the interaction between the brothers with the analytical detachment she brought to complex problems. She could see the potential benefits of Thomas's business expertise and financial connections, but she also recognized the emotional costs that working with him would impose on Marcus. Her loyalty was entirely to Marcus, who had shown her unwavering support and belief in her abilities. Danny's reaction to Thomas's arrival was even more pointed. He had borne the direct consequences of his older brother's absence, struggling with his disability while Marcus sacrificed his career to provide care and support. Danny's questions about Thomas's startup proposal were sharp and skeptical, probing for weaknesses in the business plan and challenging assumptions about market demand for adaptive racing technologies. The garage became the site of an impromptu family meeting that was equal parts business negotiation and emotional confrontation. Thomas presented his vision with polished confidence, outlining market opportunities, competitive advantages, and growth strategies that demonstrated his professional competence. But his presentation felt disconnected from the personal passion that had driven Marcus and Sophia to create their innovations in the first place. Dr. Walsh found herself in the unexpected position of mediating between family members while also advocating for her own research proposal. Her academic background had prepared her for complex negotiations, but the emotional dynamics of the Chen family reunion added layers of complication that pure logic couldn't address. As the afternoon wore on, the various proposals began to blur together in a cacophony of competing visions for the future. Each option had merit. Each carried risks, and each would fundamentally change the trajectory of Marcus and Sophia's lives. The decision felt impossibly weighty, especially given the compressed timeline imposed by the various organizations. Sophia finally broke the deadlock by suggesting they needed time away from the garage and all the competing pressures to think clearly about their options. She proposed that she and Marcus take a drive to the local racing track where her passion for motorsports had first developed, hoping that returning to the source of their inspiration might provide clarity about their next steps. The Millbrook Speedway was a modest facility compared to the grand venues where professional racing took place, but it held special significance for Sophia as the place where she had first fallen in love with the sport. Marcus had brought her there several times during the development of their racing car, using the track to test various components and refine the vehicle's performance characteristics. As they sat in the parking area overlooking the track, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this crossroads. 6 months ago, this was all just a dream, she said to Marcus. Now we have the power to make dreams come true for other people like me. That responsibility is more important than money or recognition. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of Sophia's words and the truth they contained. Their success had created opportunities not just for themselves, but for countless other individuals whose disabilities had excluded them from participating in activities they loved. The decisions they made would affect the development of adaptive technologies for years to come. Thomas is right about the business potential, Marcus admitted reluctantly. His connections could help us reach a much larger market, much faster than we could manage on our own. But I don't trust his motives, and I'm not sure I want to build a company with someone who abandoned our family when we needed him most. Sophia considered this carefully, watching as a few amateur racers took practice laps around the track below them. What if we could find a way to get the benefits of his business expertise without giving him control over our innovations? She asked. Maybe there's a middle path that doesn't require choosing between family reconciliation and protecting our interests. The idea of a hybrid approach began to take shape as they discussed various alternatives to the all-or-nothing proposals they had received. Perhaps they could license specific technologies to Sterling Motorsports while retaining rights to pursue other applications through university research. Maybe Thomas could serve as a business consultant rather than a full partner, providing expertise without gaining ownership of their intellectual property. As the sun began to set over the speedway, Marcus and Sophia felt a renewed sense of clarity about their priorities and values. The recognition and opportunities they had gained were important, but they couldn't be allowed to overshadow the original purpose of their work: creating technologies that would enable disabled individuals to participate fully in activities they were passionate about. The drive back to Millbrook took them through neighborhoods where Marcus had grown up, past the schools Sophia attended, and through the commercial district, where they had both struggled with the limitations imposed by their circumstances. The familiar surroundings reminded them of how far they had traveled, and how many people had supported their journey along the way. When they returned to the garage, they found that the various interested parties had been networking among themselves, creating new possibilities for collaboration that hadn't existed when each was pursuing exclusive arrangements. Dr. Walsh and Victoria Sterling had discovered mutual interests in advancing adaptive technology research, while Thomas had begun exploring ways to structure partnerships that would benefit all parties involved. The evening brought a community celebration that transformed the garage and surrounding area into an impromptu festival. Neighbors contributed food, local musicians provided entertainment, and the entire neighborhood gathered to honor Marcus and Sophia's achievement. The celebration felt more meaningful than the formal recognition they had received at the expo, representing acceptance and support from the people who knew them best. As the party continued around them, Marcus and Sophia found themselves planning not just their immediate next steps, but a long-term vision for how their innovations could create lasting change in the racing industry and beyond. They talked about establishing a foundation to support young disabled engineers, creating educational programs to inspire the next generation of adaptive technology developers, and building partnerships that would accelerate the development of inclusive design principles. The conversation attracted the attention of several visitors who had remained after the formal negotiations concluded. Danny contributed insights based on his experience with disability advocacy organizations. Lena Reyes offered perspectives on the challenges faced by families dealing with disability and limited resources. Even some of Marcus's longtime customers shared stories about innovations they had witnessed in their own fields, suggesting applications for adaptive technologies that hadn't been previously considered. Dr. Walsh began sketching out a research program that could accommodate multiple funding sources and partnership arrangements, allowing Marcus and Sophia to pursue both immediate commercial applications and longer-term academic research. The hybrid approach would provide financial stability while preserving the creative freedom that had made their original breakthrough possible. Victoria Sterling, who had initially insisted on exclusive rights to their technologies, began reconsidering her position as she recognized the broader potential of collaborative development. Her organization's resources could accelerate commercialization, while university research explored applications beyond racing. The combined approach might produce better results than either path pursued independently. Thomas found himself gradually adjusting his startup proposal to accommodate the family dynamics and community values that were clearly important to Marcus. His business instincts told him that forcing his brother to choose between financial success and personal relationships would ultimately be counterproductive for all parties involved. As the evening wound down and the various stakeholders began finalizing their collaborative arrangements, Marcus realized that their success had created something more valuable than any individual contract or partnership agreement. They had proven that innovation could emerge from unexpected places, and that diverse perspectives could solve problems that had stymied conventional approaches for years. Sophia sat in her wheelchair, surrounded by notebooks filled with ideas for future projects, funding proposals, and technical specifications for improvements to their original design. Her role had evolved from enthusiastic collaborator to essential partner, someone whose insights were sought by industry leaders and academic researchers alike. The transformation was remarkable, but it felt natural and earned, rather than sudden or undeserved. The final agreements reached that evening represented a complex web of partnerships, licensing arrangements, and research collaborations that would have been impossible to envision when Marcus and Sophia first began working together. Sterling Motorsports would fund the immediate commercialization of their racing car design, while providing resources for Sophia's education and career development. The university consortium would support longer-term research into broader applications of adaptive technology, with Marcus serving as a principal investigator. Thomas would provide business development services without gaining ownership rights, allowing him to contribute his expertise while respecting the family relationships he had previously neglected. Most importantly, Marcus and Sophia retained creative control over their innovations, ensuring that future developments would continue to serve the disability community rather than just generating profits for corporate shareholders. They had learned to navigate the complex world of business negotiations without compromising the values and relationships that had made their success possible in the first place. As Marcus locked up the garage for the night, he reflected on the remarkable transformation that had occurred in just 24 hours. The cluttered workspace that had served as their laboratory and meeting place would soon be supplemented by professional facilities and sophisticated equipment, but it would remain the heart of their operation, the place where impossible dreams had been transformed into tangible reality. Sophia's mother arrived to take her home, but not before Sophia and Marcus had planned their schedule for the following day. There were contracts to review, technical specifications to refine, and new projects to begin planning. The recognition they had gained at the expo was just the beginning of a journey that would take them far beyond their original ambitions. The drive through Millbrook's quiet streets felt different now, charged with possibility and potential that hadn't existed just days before. The neighborhood hadn't changed, but Marcus and Sophia's place within it had been fundamentally transformed. They were no longer just residents pursuing impossible dreams. They were proven innovators, whose work would inspire others to challenge conventional limitations and pursue their own breakthroughs. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight they could rest in the satisfaction of having navigated complex negotiations while preserving the relationships and values that mattered most to them. They had learned that success didn't require abandoning principles or compromising integrity, that it was possible to achieve recognition and financial security while remaining true to the community and causes that had shaped their journey. The garage stood quiet in the darkness, its modest exterior giving no hint of the revolutionary work that had been accomplished within its walls. But inside, carefully secured and ready for the next phase of development, sat a racing car that represented far more than automotive innovation. It was proof that extraordinary achievements were possible when passion met expertise, when individual talent combined with community support, and when the pursuit of dreams served purposes larger than personal advancement. In homes throughout Millbrook and beyond, other dreamers were already being inspired by Marcus and Sophia's example, beginning to imagine their own impossible projects and considering how they might transform limitations into opportunities for innovation. The ripple effects of their success would extend far beyond the racing industry, encouraging people everywhere to look past conventional barriers and pursue the kind of breakthrough thinking that could change the world. 2 years had transformed the cramped garage in Millbrook into something unrecognizable. Where once Marcus had struggled with outdated welding equipment and makeshift workbenches, now stood a state-of-the-art research and development facility that attracted visitors from around the globe. The original space had been expanded into adjacent buildings, creating specialized areas for prototyping, testing, and manufacturing that rivaled anything found in major automotive corporations. Sophia wheeled through the facility with the confidence of someone who belonged at the center of cutting-edge innovation. At 19, she had completed her automotive engineering degree in record time, while simultaneously serving as the primary test driver for every vehicle that emerged from their collaborative workshops. Her insights had shaped not just the technical specifications of their adaptive racing cars, but the entire philosophy behind inclusive design that now influenced manufacturers worldwide. The success of their original racing car had spawned an entire product line of adaptive vehicles, from go-karts designed for children with disabilities to professional racing machines that competed successfully against conventional designs. Each vehicle incorporated innovations that seemed obvious in retrospect, but had required breakthrough thinking to conceptualize and implement. The waiting list for their custom builds stretched for months, with orders coming from athletes, recreational drivers, and racing teams across multiple continents. Marcus had evolved from struggling welder to respected innovator, whose opinions carried weight in boardrooms and engineering conferences. His approach to adaptive technology had influenced industry standards and safety regulations, while his insistence on user-centered design had challenged manufacturers to reconsider fundamental assumptions about accessibility and performance. The recognition felt surreal at times, but it was grounded in tangible improvements to the lives of disabled individuals who could now participate in activities previously beyond their reach. The relationship with Thomas had stabilized into a productive, if somewhat formal, partnership. His business expertise had proven invaluable in navigating complex licensing deals and international expansion, while his connections in the investment community had provided access to capital that accelerated their growth beyond what academic or corporate partnerships alone could have achieved. The family dynamics remained complicated, but shared success had created a foundation for mutual respect, if not complete trust. Danny had found new purpose as an advocate and consultant for other disabled individuals seeking to participate in motorsports. His apartment had been transformed into an informal counseling center where newly injured athletes could receive guidance about adaptive technologies and career possibilities they might not have considered. His work provided emotional support that complemented the technical solutions developed by Marcus and Sophia, creating a comprehensive approach to helping people rebuild their lives after traumatic injuries. The breakthrough that had brought them to international attention came when Sophia successfully qualified for and competed in the Indianapolis 500, becoming the first wheelchair-bound driver to participate in the prestigious race. Her specially designed vehicle had not only met all safety requirements, but had demonstrated performance characteristics that impressed veteran drivers and engineering teams. She finished in the top 15, a remarkable achievement that generated worldwide media coverage and inspired countless individuals facing similar challenges. The media attention following Sophia's Indianapolis performance had attracted interest from automotive manufacturers, who recognized the commercial potential of adaptive design principles. Major corporations began licensing Marcus's innovations for integration into consumer vehicles, creating features that benefited all drivers while specifically addressing the needs of disabled customers. The broader market adoption validated their belief that inclusive design could improve products for everyone, rather than creating separate and inferior alternatives. Educational institutions had also embraced their approach, with engineering programs incorporating adaptive design principles into standard curricula. Marcus frequently guest lectured at universities, sharing not just technical knowledge, but the philosophy behind user-centered innovation that had guided their work from the beginning. Students were challenged to consider accessibility as a design constraint that sparked creativity rather than limiting possibilities. The foundation they had established used proceeds from their commercial success to fund research into adaptive technologies beyond racing. Grants supported projects ranging from accessible recreational equipment to specialized tools for disabled professionals, extending their impact far beyond the automotive industry. Young engineers from diverse backgrounds received scholarships and mentorship opportunities that ensured the next generation would continue advancing inclusive design principles. Sophia's notebooks, once filled with dreams and theoretical modifications, now contained detailed specifications for projects that would reshape multiple industries. Her role had expanded beyond test driving to include product development, where her unique perspective as both engineer and end user provided insights that conventional design teams frequently missed. She had become a sought-after consultant, whose recommendations influenced product development at companies worldwide. The garage in Millbrook remained operational as both a working facility and a symbol of what could be achieved with determination and creative thinking. Visitors often expressed surprise at the modest origins of innovations that had transformed entire industries. But Marcus and Sophia took pride in maintaining connections to the community that had supported their early efforts. Local students regularly toured the facility, seeing firsthand that extraordinary achievements could emerge from ordinary circumstances. International recognition had brought opportunities to expand their work to developing countries, where access to adaptive technologies was even more limited than in wealthy nations. Partnerships with humanitarian organizations allowed them to develop simplified, lower-cost versions of their innovations that could be manufactured and maintained in regions with limited infrastructure. The global reach of their impact fulfilled ambitions they had never dared to articulate during their early struggles. The racing world had been permanently changed by their contributions, with adaptive categories now standard features of major competitions rather than specialized events that attracted limited attention. Professional drivers increasingly competed using vehicles that incorporated design principles originally developed for disabled athletes, as the performance advantages became apparent to everyone regardless of physical capability. As Sophia prepared for her next racing season, driving a vehicle that represented the latest evolution of their collaborative innovations, she reflected on the journey that had brought them from a cluttered garage to the pinnacle of their respective fields. The recognition and financial success were gratifying, but the knowledge that their work had created opportunities for thousands of other individuals provided deeper satisfaction than any award or contract could deliver. Marcus stood in the original section of their facility, now preserved as a reminder of their humble beginnings, surrounded by the tools and equipment that had seemed so inadequate just years before. The transformation felt miraculous at times, but it had been built through countless hours of detailed work, persistent problem-solving, and unwavering commitment to principles that had guided them from the beginning. The future held possibilities that seemed limitless, with new technologies emerging from their laboratories that would further expand opportunities for disabled individuals to participate fully in activities they were passionate about. The dreams that had once seemed impossibly distant were now launching points for even more ambitious goals that would benefit generations of innovators and athletes who followed in their path. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.